Today we're going to focus on building an amortization table in Excel. So as you can see, I have an Excel spreadsheet open up here, and I just have basically three main inputs that we're going to need. One, the loan amount, the payment, and the monthly rate. The monthly rate is just going to be the nominal annual rate divided by 12. That's what we typically calculate so that we could figure out what the actual monthly rate is. Okay, so now down here I'm going to have the month, the beginning balance, the payment, which is a fixed number. That's what we're going to pay per month over the lifetime of the loan, assuming the fixed interest rate. Then we're going to have interest, the principal portion of that payment, and the ending balance. So the first thing we're going to do is we are going to calculate our loan payment. So I'm just going to keep this simple and suppose that we're going to finance a house for $100,000. Okay, so we have $100,000. Now I want to figure out the payment. Now let's just suppose that the rate, and I'm making up a rate here, let's just say that the rate is 4.25% compounded monthly. Now you don't really need to type this in, but I'm just going to go ahead and put that in there so that we know what we're dealing with. So we're going to assume 12 payments per year, 12 compounds per year. So I'm going to come over here and I am going to go over to apps. And we could do this in Excel as well, but since we're pretty used to doing this in our calculator, I'm just going to go to the TVM solver. So for a fixed interest rate loan for 30 years, well, we're assuming we're making 30 years worth of payments on a monthly basis. So we're going to make a total of 360 payments, which is the same as the number of times interest will be charged to us. So interest rate would be 4.25%. The present value, of course, is going to be, well, what do we receive? Well, we receive $100,000 initially. We're going to calculate our payment, and what we hope to accomplish is that by the time things are over, in other words, by the time we've made all our payments, we hope to have a zero balance. So you might say, well, shouldn't that be a negative 100,000? Well, no, our payments actually is going to be the one that's negative. That's what's going to work to pay down this present value. So now I need to make sure that my compoundings and payments per year are 12. I'm going to come over here and calculate payment. Okay, so according to this, I'm going to pay roughly $491.94. Okay, so I'm going to come over here and I'm going to enter it in as a positive value. $491.94. Now my monthly rate, now I'm actually going to do 0.0425 divided by 12. Oops, sorry. And the thing we have to enter in here, hopefully you've been watching some of the entering data into Excel and using formulas. Anytime we use a formula, we have to do equals and then our calculation. So you'll notice that if you go back to the cell up here in the formula bar, you'll be able to see what you typed in, and here you'll actually see what that result is. Okay, so here all I'm going to do is just type in the months. So now I want this to basically go from 0 all the way up to 360. Well, the simple thing, well, you could say, okay, I'm just going to type in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. We're going to use a formula to say equals, in the new cell, the one above it, plus 1. So what this is going to do is now if I just copy this cell and I paste it for all the cells below, you're going to notice that it takes the previous value and adds 1 to it. That's kind of the cool thing about Excel. So I'm just going to kind of drag this thing down. I have a cell copied, and now I'm going to highlight a bunch of cells all the way. It's going to need to go past 360 since we didn't start at cell 1. So I'm going to come all the way down here to roughly, I don't know, about 370 or so, and I'm going to Control V. I'm going to paste this thing. Alternatively, you could do right-click on those highlighted bars and do paste. That would also work. So let's see how far down that took us. Alright, a little bit farther than we needed to go. We hope to have this thing paid off. So I'm just going to delete what I don't need. Now the beginning balance, I'm going to basically pull the beginning balance from the loan amount. So all I'm doing is going to that beginning balance month 0, hitting equals, and then going over to where my loan value is stored. Now I want to lock this cell in place, so I'm going to hit F4. In other words, I'm going to ensure that no matter what happens, that beginning balance is always being pulled from the same spot. So for example, you noticed how when you copied and pasted the value down, like here, all the way down, it actually pulled off from the last cell. So notice how it always adjusts. if it has those dollar signs, this basically means lock in column C, lock in row 2. So now if I ever copy this thing and move it somewhere, notice that it's still referencing cell C2 because I locked it in place. Okay, I also want to do the same thing with my payment because I'm assuming that I have a constant payment. That's what a fixed rate loan is known for. So I'm going to hit F4. That locks both the row and the column. If I hit it again, that changes it. So now I'm basically locked in row 3, but not locked in column C. So now if I copied and pasted, you'll notice that it adjusted accordingly so that it's roughly pulling in 2 columns to the left and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows above. Okay, so I want to basically hit F4 until column C, row 3 is locked. Okay, well now interest. Well, interest, we're assuming that this is about 0.3542% per month. So now if I want to calculate interest, well, I want to always calculate the interest based off of what my beginning balance is. Okay, so I'm going to take this guy. I'm going to lock that in place because I always want that same interest rate. But I'm going to do times whatever my current balance is for the beginning of that month. So notice how I'm not going to lock in D7 because I want that to basically follow me down as I go down to the next row. Okay, so that means that 0.3542 of a $100,000 balance tells me that my interest total, my total interest is going to be $354.17. So that means to calculate my principal, in other words, what's going towards paying down my balance, I'm going to say equals, take my payment, subtract away what goes towards interest, and that means only $137.77 of that goes towards my actual principal. Now one thing I can do is say, okay, what percentage is this of my total balance, of my total payment? And you can see that only about 28% of my payment for the first end of the first month goes towards principal alone. Well, what's my ending balance? Well, since I started with 100,000 and I effectively paid down the amount of principal corresponding to the 0th month principal amount, I'm going to subtract away that from the balance. And that means overall, and I'm going to adjust the cell a little bit so I can see the cents. I'm going to reduce basically so I get it to the nearest cent. Now you can kind of see what my balance is. Okay, well the beginning balance for the next month is going to equal the ending balance for the previous month. And now the beauty of all this is, well, I can just copy the payment down. The interest, I still want to take 0.003542 times the balance, except I want to do that for the new balance. So now notice that I fixed C4, but now because I didn't fix the $100,000, it drops down one cell, so it pulls in the new beginning balance. And now you can see that the interest is just slightly less than the previous month. So I'm going to copy down this formula. Notice that that's going to take the difference between my current payment, which is the same, minus my interest. So that means since less goes towards interest, more goes towards principal. And my ending balance, I'm going to copy that formula down since nothing's locked. And that takes away my current principal from the beginning balance of that month. And now you can see that we've dropped down the balance a little bit more. So the percentage should also go up a little bit because now my percentage of principal of the entire payment goes up. Well, you don't want to do this over and over again. So now notice I could just highlight the entire row, copy and paste it all the way down. Well, I don't want to do this 360 some odd times, so all I'm going to do is I'm going to scroll down to the very bottom. Now basically you could just click and drag like I'm doing here. I'm actually using my keyboard by hitting Shift, selecting a cell, hitting Shift, and then just scrolling all the way down. Now you only have to really highlight that first column because you copied an entire row. So once I hit Control V, it's actually going to paste every single entry across those rows. Well, now I can kind of go down and get a visual of this. Okay, so notice that my ending balance is progressively going down. My principal amount is progressively going up. because I'm paying more and more towards that principal every month. So you can see we started at about 28% of our total payment represented principal. And as we go further and further down, you can see that effectively by roughly the almost the 168th, 169th month, actually right around this region, I guess closer to 164, now we're effectively paying about $245 towards interest and $246 towards principal. Well, that's great. So by the time we get down here to 360 months, the way our payment is calculated, you'll notice that now, well, because of rounding error in our actual payment, you'll notice that now I have roughly a zero balance. I'm negative 8 cents in. That means I paid a little bit too much, but again, we get the idea. That's because of rounding error. Now, one really neat thing I could do is I could actually come in here and say, well, I want to see a graph to see how much principal, the ratio of principal compared to the total payment. So all I'm going to do is insert a scatter plot, and what I'm going to do is actually I'm going to play a little trick here. I'm going to say take these values. I'm going to right click column I and do insert, so that will basically insert a row between my ending balance and my percentage of principal. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this column here, so you can just shift, drag down, or basically click and drag all the way down, and I'm just going to paste that in or next to my basically my percentage. And so now all I'm going to do is I'm going to select both of those columns. Now I did it quite fast, but all you really have to do is click, highlight, and drag down until you run into the 360th row. And I'm going to insert a scatter plot, and I actually want it to look, I don't want to have all these little dots for every single month, so I'm just going to do a smoothed curve. And so you can kind of see what happens over time, that sort of exponentially the percentage of principal paid, which is measured over here, compared to the actual number of months, progressively increases at an increasing rate. So anyway, that's just sort of a tidbit. If you wanted to include that in your data, that's how we would do it. So that is all there is to amortization. And in any loan, you can actually do this, whether that's a mortgage payment, a car payment, any sort of consumer loan that you could possibly take out. This also works for credit cards quite well. That's all there is to it.